Good evening and a very, very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us here on the Football Out West Show, episode 94, season 4. And my name is Tonchi Prusak, and a very good evening to you, Craig. Craig Filer, how are you?
Yes, very well, Tonch. You?
Nice cold night, nice winter's night. And we've got a great show to warm the cockles of your heart, folks. I'm very good, Craig. I had a great weekend. I even managed to have a bit of a social life last night, a friend's 50th birthday. I don't really get a chance these days much. Some great football action at community level. And the little Tuckers doing really well today. Coached the team. And look, when we go into the mid-season break on top of that, I'm pretty happy. So I can't complain. What about yourself, Craig? I hear you had a very good evening on the weekend, and tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, we did have a good weekend. Tonch spent a night out with the family on Friday night in the city, which is the first time we've done for probably just over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years since I've been to the city and had a night out. And the first time we had a night out in the casino with the kids, because they weren't, or one of them certainly wasn't old enough last time. So we had a good night on. We had a good night on Saturday, and then obviously yesterday we had the game. So today nice and relaxing.
Absolutely. Now, we've got a fantastic show tonight. We've got some great guests, and we've also had a late substitution. Craig, tell us who are our guests for tonight.
Yeah, we have. Unfortunately for us, Michael Lynch, who was on the show last week, unfortunately can't make it this evening. So we've got a last-minute substitution, and we've got the Professional Football Association co-CEO, BEAU BUSCH, who's going to join us around about 7:45, alongside the former Technical Director of Football Australia, Rob Sherman, as we continue the debate and the discussions around the state of football in Australia.
From Kings of Oceania to Asian Minnows behind the Socceroos Decline. That's been the basis of our discussion last week that we had with Michael Lynch, and we also had that with Rob Sherman, and that's going to be the basis of our discussion, a big discussion, and it's great. We've got the co-CEO of the Professional Footballers Association, BEAU BUSCH, joining us that little later on. That's all in the press box. Sorry, I'll get that right. But in the meantime, we've got a massive weekend roundup to get through. So we're not going to waste too much time. We're going to get onto that very, very shortly after this break. Big shout out to our major sponsors for the year. Caroline Springs George Cross, home of the award-winning Georgie's on Vista Bistro. Big shout out to Mark and the crew down at Caroline Springs George Cross. Without them, we certainly would not have been able to bring you the Football Out West show in 2022. So we're going to have a quick break, little messages from our sponsors, and when we return, it's the weekend roundup. Don't go away, folks. Oop.
You find authentic Maltese cuisine? At Georgie's on Vista, in the heart of Fraser Rise. We have a menu to suit everyone, which includes kids and seniors meals, and a cocktail list that will need you to come back several times to get through. Our specialty nights are a big hit. Tuesday is $20 Palmer night with a selection of Palmers to choose from. Kids eat free Wednesday night. With every paid adult meal, you get one free kids meal. Thursday is Maltese night. Check out the Maltese specials on our specials board. And Friday night, we have happy hour between 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Be sure to book your table to avoid disappointment. Bookings can be made via our website, georgesonvista.com.au. See you at Georges on Vista. You'll find us at Caroline Springs, George Cross. Georges on Vista is in the heart of Fraser Rise. You'll find us at Caroline Springs, George Cross. Looking for a bit of fun with your meals? Tuesday night is bingo night. Bingo books are $2, eyes down at $7. And we have a special bingo menu for you to choose from, so be sure to get in early and grab a bite to eat beforehand. Friday night is poker night. Registration is from 6:30pm, with poker starting at 7:30pm. Why not join us beforehand for happy hour? Kicks off at 5:30. We're also on Uber Eats, so you can enjoy your favourite Georgie's meals in the comfort of your own home. Find us on the app. Dining in? Be sure to book your table to avoid disappointment. Bookings can be made via our website, georgesonvista.com.au.
Welcome back to the Football Out West show. Episode 9. On Friday night, we had 3 games, all draws, and we'll start off scoreless draws because we don't have any footage of the scoreless draws. South Melbourne and Green Gully. Let's go through that one first up.
Yeah, I suppose at the top of the table clash, we suppose, first versus fourth as they were, and then 0-0 draw down there at Lakeside Stadium are probably a fair result. Looking at the highlights of the game, both teams had plenty of chances, but a pretty cagey game all up, and obviously a 0-0 result resulted in 1 point for each of the respective teams.
Now, a bit of a shock, I guess, if you like. Bentley Greens, they hosted Hume City at the Kingston Heath Soccer Complex. They were probably expected to do a lot better, but Hume City, a gutsy and tenacious effort. They drew a point, and actually, as a result of that point, they've now managed to jump out of the relegation zone, well, albeit temporarily, but nonetheless, a 0-0 draw against Bentley Greens at Kingston Heath. Not a bad result, is it?
Yeah, look, it's a good result. Goran Lozovsky has gone in there and changed a few things, got a few new players come through the door, and it's a good result for them. You know, it's a result that's, 1 point. 1 point is better than anything at this stage of the season, and away on the road down at Bentley Greens is never an easy task, Tons. But a good point for them, and it'll set them up for next week's fixture.
Absolutely. Now, the big game on Friday night at Knights Stadium was the Croatian derby, Melbourne Knights and St Albans Saints. And this is where we start our footage roundup, if you like, Craig.
Yeah, a 1-1 draw here. Goal here for George Ott in the 41st minute, just before half time. Bit of a clanger there from Michael Grilic at the back for St Albans. And George Ott, new to the club, popped in and got his first goal on 42 minutes and set up the second half nicely. Unfortunately for Knights, they couldn't hold on to that lead. And a fantastic run here from Joey Monarch on the left hand side, and a great clip ball into the 6-yard box for Adam Odder to get the equaliser. So a great result for St Albans on the road. Croatian derby, a local derby as well, and 1-1 that finished.
Moved along onto Saturday afternoon at Avenger Park. It was a goal fest. It started off slowly. I think it was 1-1 at one stage between Eastern Lions and Avondale FC. But
you started off slowly, yeah. Eastern Lions took a surprise lead just on 3 minutes there, with Costa Emmanuel getting the early goal. But from then on, it was all Avondale, comfortably running out 5 winners up there at Avenger Park. Some sloppy defence from Eastern Lions on a number of occasions, and young Manny Agek getting his hat trick. Had his chance over the last couple of weeks at Avondale through injuries, with a number of injuries, and certainly staked a claim there for a regular start with 3 goals. Christian Trzewski and Liston Diaz getting the others for Avondale.
Avondale moves into 4th spot with 34 points. I wonder how they're going on last year's ladder. I've got no idea. If anyone does, shoot us a comment in the comments section. Eastern Lions firmly entrenched to the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah, just
and they
on
certainly
that,
look like they'll be relegated.
Yeah, on that last year, I believe, somebody will quote me, I'm sure Brenton will come on, but I'm pretty sure that Oakley are just winning that now. But I think there's one game left on the ladder, which comes up in the next week or so, I think.
Okay.
So we'll know in the next couple of weeks who actually wins the. Seems weird, doesn't it? Who wins the 2021 championship? So yeah. It's a
Yeah,
smart ball.
absolutely. Oh, that's fun and games. But let's not worry about last year. Let's worry about this year. As we said, Avondale big winners over the hapless Eastern Lions. On to the Dandenong Derby, Dandenong City versus Dandenong Thunder, Craig.
Yeah, I spoke to Dandenong Thunder's coach David Chick earlier on this afternoon, actually, and get a bit of information about this goal. And great first goal, new signing Scott Lockhead gets a volley before Dandenong City got back into it. Some tenacious play down the left hand side and a ball into the box for Denise to put away just inside the 6-yard box. We'll see that coming up shortly, but
There we go, great goal.
That was then back down to 1-1, and then in the second half, game opened up a little bit more, and Dandenong Thunder, 2 good goals actually. One from James Poole coming up, a ball over the top. Look at the state on that pitch, by the way. That's
Good
MP.
crowd. Yeah.
Best league in Victoria, and that's what teams have to play on week in, week out. It's a disgrace, really, isn't it? But James Poole
I
there,
think it's going to.
goal on 47 minutes. So whatever team talk Lube had with Dandenong City at halftime certainly went out the window. And then Scott Lockhead, who's a left-footed player, by the way, has just put in a scorcher from 20 meters into the bottom corner to win the game 3-1.
Moving on to the Greek derby, Port Melbourne versus Oakley Cannons, and it all started very, very early in the second minute. Before you knew it, the Oakley Cannons had taken a lead. Now, we spoke to Adam Pittick last week on the show. Port Melbourne were doing really, really well this year, and they were looking forward to this game. But the Cannons, they were very quick off the mark, and in the end recorded a 3-1 win. But they're looking really, really potent, aren't they? The Cannons up front.
Yeah, they are. I've seen them a number of times this year, Tonch, and commentated on them a number of times, and they're a very, very well organised side. Coincidentally, Daniel Clark scored the first goal inside a minute, but just 30 seconds prior to that, straight after kickoff, Port Melbourne had a fantastic opportunity that they squirmed, and they went straight up the other end and put the ball in the back of the net. But some good goals there. Scored Daniel Clark with 2, and the formidable Joe Guest getting the other one there for a 3-1 win on the road for Oakley Cannons. Yeah, big result for them, that, and they'll be a bit disappointed one for Adam Pittick, and he was pretty buoyant last week. Yeah, he was pretty buoyant last week, and this would have hurt because it's at home and it's one of the title contenders as well. So,
as we said, a late consolation goal there. But last but not least, Altona Magic versus Heidelberg United at Paisley Park, and the Burgers, they're doing really, really well, just notching up win after win after win. Did you watch any of this game, Craig?
No, I didn't. But again, I've spoken to a couple of people, and it was I think Heidelberg. That goal was coming very early in the first half. It'd been coming for a while. Adrian Azara, getting his 8th goal of the season, putting Hume United 1-0 up, and essentially that was the 3 points for them. And as you said, Tonch, they've been going at it quite nicely. Heidelberg over the last few weeks, getting results, got their strong squad back now, and they cemented their place in the top 6, and some big games to come up on the weekend.
Yeah, 3 points clear of 7th place Bentley Greens. A slightly better goal difference, but that can change very, very quickly. But there you go, folks. You can see the standings. South Melbourne on top, 44. Oakley Cannons closing that gap a little bit. Yeah, it's an enthralling battle for that minor premier. Port Melbourne Sharks, Avondale, Green Gully, and Heidelberg United making up the top 6. Now, at the other end of the table, Dandenong City and Hume City have swapped places. And I think that's going to be just as exciting a battle for that last remaining safe spot, if you like, or if you like, the last remaining relegation spot. Eastern Lions, as we said, unless some dramatic miracle happens, they are staring down relegation. But Dandenong City, Hume City, it's going to be important the next few weeks, definitely. Let's look at round 20, Craig.
Yeah, just on that, Tonch. If you look at Dandenong Cities, and I was looking at this afternoon of they're running. Dandenong City have got Oakley Cannons, then they got Altona Magic, Port Melbourne Sharks, Heidelberg, Avondale, South Melbourne, and Bentley Greens.
Not looking good.
You wouldn't fancy your chances out of that. 6 of the 7 games there, or 7 of the 8 games there, are going to be pushing for that top 6 spot. So it's going to be a very difficult task for Dandenong City. But as long as they're in touch of Hume City, they think they've got a chance. So it's going to be very interesting to see that over the next couple of weeks.
Well, Brenton Ray does come in with the goods, as he does week in, week out. Oakley Cannons now 2 points ahead of Avondale FC with 1 game to play. Okay, I'm wondering which round that is. This Friday, Oakley Cannons are at home to Dandenong City, a tough game there. The Eastern Suburbs Derby, or the Southeastern Suburbs Derby. That's at Jack Edwards Reserve at 8:30 p.m. Green Gully at home to Bentley Greens. Well, that's going to be a good one. That's going to be a really, really interesting one. Gully, buoyed by their result against South Melbourne, they host the Greens at Green Gully Reserve. Mate,
yeah, I'm not sure what will happen with that one, Tonch. Whether that game will get postponed or moved or whatever, because Green Gully are in Australia Cup action on Tuesday evening against Heidelberg. For that finals or the semi-final of the Doherty Cup. So it'll be really interesting whether they play Tuesday and Friday night or whether will get moved. I suppose we'll find out more over the coming days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, at the moment, that game is scheduled for the Friday night. So Green Gully at home to Bentley Greens, the Battle of the Greens, if you like, the Green Derby. Oakley Cannons hosting Dandenong City. And then we move on to Saturday. Avondale at home to Dandenong Thunder. Avondale FC, as we saw, in unbelievably good red-hot form. Now, they're once again back at Avenger Park against Dandenong Thunder. Now, look, Dandenong Thunder, they defeated Dandenong City, but look, they've got Melbourne Knights, Altona Magic, St Albans Saints all breathing down their neck. It's an important game for Thunder. They really need to sort of, if they harbour any slim chance of finishing in the top 6, they're going to need a really good run of results, starting, I guess, with, they did it on the weekend against Dandenong City, but they need this one against Avondale. What are your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, look, I think Dandenong Thunder are probably where they expect to be. I don't think they would really honestly have thought at the start of the season that they would be in a top 6. It's they probably don't have the spend that some of the other teams have, and they've got a lot of youngsters in that group at Thunder. They've had a lot of injuries as well, I know that, and they've had players playing out of position. So where they are is where they are. But you're right, Tons. A win away at Avondale will almost secure their promotion. Their standing in MPL next year. I think they're safe enough already. You're 12 points ahead of Hume City in 12th place. So they're probably safe already. But a win on Saturday will give them slender hopes of getting into the top 6 and obviously further enhance their MPL standings for next year.
Yeah, it's going to be top versus bottom at Gardeners Creek Reserve on Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. when Eastern Lions take on South Melbourne. We don't hold much hope for the hosts there, South Melbourne. However, they need a win here because Oakley Cannons are breathing down their necks. And look, by that stage, they'll know if Oakley Cannons are temporarily on top, because if Oakley defeat Dandenong City on Friday, they'll jump to outright top spot with the game extra. But an important game for South to win. Altona Magic at home to Port Melbourne Sharks. This should be an interesting one, Craig. 6 p.m. at Paisley Park. Port Melbourne, the Wounded Sharks, and Altona Magic also narrowly lost to the Burgers. This is going to be a good game, this one.
Yeah, it will be. It's a local derby, isn't it? There's not a lot between Altona and Port Melbourne, so there'll be a good crowd down there. Yeah, look, it's a difficult one to call, this one. I've watched a lot of Magic this year. Scoring has been their problem. If you look at their goals for versus against, it's not healthy. That's been their biggest issue, and obviously when you're not scoring goals, it puts massive pressures on your back line. So maybe Magic's got something in the pipeline this week to maybe bring a player or two in. But yeah, that'll be a very interesting game. It's a third versus 10th, and again, Altona need to win there. They need to ensure that they don't have any slip ups coming into the end of the season and secure their status for next year.
Another game that's really important, I guess, more so for the Melbourne Knights. Oh, no, I take that back. For both sides, Hume City hosting Melbourne Knights the Saturday night, 7 p.m. at Valley Park Centre. Hume City need to get away from Dandenong City. At the same time, Melbourne Knights have got a very, very slim chance of getting near the top six. But they could do their sister club, Dandenong City, a huge favour by defeating Hume City. The last time these two sides met at Summer Street, Melbourne Knights ran out easy winners, 3-0 over Hume City. I don't think they're going to have it all their way, the Knights. They've had a very indifferent season this year. And Goran Lozanovsky, well, he'll be really keen to work on I guess Hume City's good result against Bentley Greens this weekend. Craig, tough game. How do you see this one?
Yeah, it is again another tough one to call. Obviously, Melbourne Knights have got the points in the bag, but you're right. They've been very up and down this year. Probably not where Knights fans and certainly Coach Steve Bebbage thought that they would be come the start of the season. I actually thought they put a very good squad together for this year, but it just hasn't happened for them. Anthony Frangi's left this week and gone off to Dandenong Thunder. So maybe again, Knights have got some plans afoot for the next couple of days before the transfer window opens. And for Hume City, again, it's a huge result. It's a huge game for them, isn't it? They get a win there. They then potentially only 5 points behind St Albans in 11th, but it gives them that daylight between Dandenong City. Should Dandenong City fail against Oakley Cannons, but they'll know that because obviously they're playing on the Friday evening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an interesting, very, very interesting round of matches starting off next Friday, folks. Really looking forward to it. It's just we're getting towards the business end of the season. Look, folks, we're going to take a very, very short break. When we return, we'll be looking at NPL2, NPL3, and State League 1. And then after that, we're going to continue with the press box tonight. A riveting discussion being planned, no doubt. I see a lot of people are very active in the chat. And Brenton Ray, as always, providing us and the viewers at home with a lot of information. And there he goes. The round of 32 is going to be televised live on 10 Play this Wednesday night from 7:30 p.m. There's a website link there as well where it says key dates confirmed. So that's going to be something else that's going to be happening this week. Lots happening as we get into the business end of the Australia Cup. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back straight after these short messages from our major sponsor, Georgie's on Vista.
Looking for a space for your next function? At Georgie's on Vista, our function room caters for all types of functions. Milestone birthdays, special religious occasions, work functions, hens or bachelor nights, baby showers, or whatever reason you decide is a good idea to get together with family and friends. Contact our friendly staff who will help you put together a menu that will suit your special occasion. Inquiries can be made via our website, georgiesonvista.com.au. Georgie's on Vista, in the heart of Fraser Rise. You'll find us at Caroline Springs, George Cross.
Welcome back to the Football Out West show. It has been a fantastic journey over the last 4 years, Craig. I just look at that 94 episodes. We're getting ever so close to the 100th episode. And that's planned for possibly that 100th episode will be happening, I'd say. Let's have a look at the dates. Sometime in August of this year, early to mid-August. So, stay tuned for that. I'm sure going to have a massive show. So thank you to everyone who has either sponsored us or who has been any of the clubs that have supported us over the years. and indeed you, the viewers. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Without further ado, Craig, let's move on now to NPL2. Now, the NPL2 is a really unusual kind of a league. On any day, anyone can win anyone. Let's look at some of the results that happened in the NPL2 over the weekend. A lot of interesting results, a lot of strange results indeed, and probably the most important thing that with North Geelong at the top of the competition standings have now opened up a rather significant 5-point gap thanks to Brunswick Juventus and their win over second place Moreland City. Let's look at the ladder. Craig, tell us more about what went on in NPL2 football over the weekend.
Yeah, we'll start up on Friday night, Tonch, with the big Moreland derby with Brunswick Juventus, formerly Moreland Zebras, defeating Moreland City 4-1 up there at CB Smith Reserve. A game that was live on MPL TV. Strange game, real strange game, because Moreland City actually played some fantastic football and were probably the better football inside, but there were times when they played football in the wrong areas at the wrong times and simply got overturned and got penalised heavily with as I said, a 4-1 win. JK with 2, Matthew Watley and Alexandra Canela scoring for Brunswick City, and Chris Theodorakopoulos scoring for Melbourne City with a 90th minute penalty. But a huge win for Juventus. I think, a loss there probably would have put them, out of a, promotion opportunity, I think. And it certainly would have cemented Moreland's cities. If they'd got the 3 points, there would have been, a big 5-point gap between them and Bulleen Lions. So missed opportunity for Moreland City, but a thankful win for Juventus, who was fully in the hunt for promotion now.
Yeah, especially since they've changed their name, they are looking the goods. Brunswick Juventus, really trying to recapture glory of yesteryear there at CB Smith Reserve. Now, Northcote City, big winners over Kingston City, 5-2 in fact. That was at the John Cain Reserve on the weekend on Saturday. Northcote City, they're another unusual team. I mean, 6 wins, 3 draws and 6 losses. They've really had a topsy-turvy, up and down sort of a year, Craig.
Yeah, I think at the start of the season you probably would have put Northcote up there as one of the favourites, and for whatever reason simply hasn't happened for them. They've bought 4 or 5 players in last week, hoping to give a bit of a push. Look, it's going to be a big ask for them. 6 points behind fifth place Pascoe Vale. But as you said earlier, Tonch, it's a strange league. Who knows in this league what's going to happen? But a 5-2 win at home against Kingston City. Dennis Menelou scoring a hat-trick. Kevin Lynch and Luke Lofts getting the goals for Northcote, and Giuseppe Marafiotti and Phil Petreschi getting the goals for Kingston City.
Now, Brunswick City, they took on Pascoe Vale at Dunstan Reserve. The score there was 1-1. 2 points lost for Pascoe Vale, but Brunswick City did very, very well. And sometimes you really have to rub your eyes and think, are they actually in 10th place? They've really given some teams a good run for their money. And also Langwarrin, they're a tough team, Craig. And we saw Langwarrin in action last week against North Geelong down in Geelong. We commentated that game. They held Bulleen Lions to a 1-1 result. And they've got a very, very well organised, particularly the defensive unit. 1-1 for Brunswick City and 1-1 for Langwarrin. 2 good results for Brunswick and Langwarrin. Not so much for Pascoe Vale and Bulleen Lions. Tell us more.
Yeah, Brunswick City. Look, I think I'll go on record as saying I think they're probably the unluckiest team in MPL. Avondale will argue and the case, and perhaps Preston Lions, but Brunswick City were on top of the ladder when COVID hit, and unfortunately for them, that's had an adverse effect on them. Struggled this year. Ricardo, their coach, leaving a few weeks ago, and a new coach coming in to take his place, and they've struggled this year. But a good 1-1 result against Pascoe Vale. Haven't got the goal for Brunswick, but Foster Hassai scoring the goal for Pascoe Vale. That keeps him in the hunt. But again, as you said, two points lost there for Pascal. Langwarren, you're right, Tonch. We watched them last week. Good side, well organised, even though they had a few players missing when we watched them. A good 1-1 draw with third place Boleyn Lions. Marwin Nilo scoring for Langwarren, and Luke Pavlou scoring for Boleyn Lions, who are also in there, Tonch. It's going to be very tight at the top. You can
Absolutely.
see those top five are really pushing for automatic two automatic places.
I guess the real concern for Moreland City, who are in second spot, is that their goal difference is not that good at positive 8 compared to Boleyn Lions positive 20, Pascal Vale positive 16, even Brunswick Juventus positive 12. All it takes is one good win, one big win, and we've seen a lot of the goals. There's, in this league, there's a lot of goals being scored. But yeah, very interesting. At the other end of the table as well, it's just as interesting. Manningham United, they've really jumped a couple of spots now after defeating Werribee City 2-1 there at Petty's Reserve yesterday. 2-1, they've now pushed Werribee City into 11th spot. Just remembering this year, the bottom two sides then go into a playoff against sides 3 and 4 in NPL 3 because next year we are going to have expanded 14-team leagues in both the NPL 2 and NPL 3 competitions. Manningham United Blues, good win over Werribee City, but mate, there must be a lot of cause for concern with the Bees. They really are struggling, and second last position now, 3 points off the pace, and with a really, really bad goal difference. Not looking good for Werribee City, is it, Craig?
No, it's not, Tonch. They've gone on a horrendous run. I can't remember what the number of games are, but it's ridiculous. Something like 12 without a win, which is unfortunately for them relegation fodder. On the other hand, Manningham picked up a massive win in front of their big crowd yesterday down at their grand opening of Petty's Reserve down there in Manningham. And a fantastic 2-1 win. Goal scorers were Noah Mialidis and Feston Azizi. Patricia scoring the goal for Werribee, but Werribee I think could be in trouble. Obviously, Govan Valley are almost certainly done and dusted and down. But Werribee, unless they can turn it around very, very quickly, they're going to be, unfortunately, they're going to be finding themselves in NPL 3 in 2023.
Yeah, speaking of Goulburn Valley, they gave the league leaders North Geelong a bit of a fright. It was 1-1 at the break, but then after that, the Warriors really turned on the afterburners and just sped away. A 5-1 win for North Geelong. And remembering, John McEwen Reserve in Shepparton has not been a happy hunting ground for the Warriors, but the table toppers, thanks to 2 goals by Caleb Mikulic, who now takes his season's tally to 14 goals, and he's by far the leading marksman in NPL 2. But we also saw Nelson Salvatore, an own goal, and the return of young Luka Jurkovic. Now, he's been off, I think, for almost 2 months with injuries or thereabouts. But the return of Jurkovic, scoring a goal, and the fact that Caleb Mikulic is once again starting to hit the back of the net, mate, that must be an ominous sign, ominous warning to the rest of the league with what... we've got 7 rounds to go, I suppose. North Geelong are really, really looking good. And if they keep on going the way they've been going, and they've got a few games against lower opposition over the next couple of weeks, North Geelong could really, really, be in pole position for promotion, Craig.
Yeah, it is good to see Luka Jurkovic back. He's a young player. I think he's only 18. Has had a good couple of seasons down there after moving from Melbourne Knights. A good young lad. Obviously, brother plays there in NPL for St Albans. But look, another good win for Stewie Begg's team. They go from strength to strength, and getting Luca back and Nelson Salvatore, who scored his second in the 2 games, and Mikulic continuing to score. It is about getting your players all firing at the same time, and hopefully for North Geelong, that's what they've got at the moment, and they've got a 5-point gap there at the top of NPL 2. As you said, they've got some of the lower teams still to play, but teams are fighting for survival, so it's not going to be easy. They've got to keep them going. They've had a fantastic season. Nobody probably would have expected them to be at the top of the ladder after round 15, but they've done a fantastic job, and hopefully they can continue that and push for MPL next year.
Two Friday night games to kick off round 16. Pascoe Vale at home to Manningham United Blues and Northcote City at home to Brunswick Juventus. North Geelong Warriors at home to Brunswick City on Saturday. Bulleen Lions host the Goulburn Valley Suns. Moreland City take on Langwarrin. That should be a really interesting game there at the Well Money Park or Campbell Reserve, as it is often known. And Kingston City then take on Werribee City at home in a Monday night fixture as well. Why are they expanding to 14 teams, says Tony Hudson? A good question. And whilst we then quickly look at the NPL 3 competition, Craig, why is the NPL 2 and NPL 3 expanding to 14 teams? Any official reasons that you know of?
Yeah, I just think it's they're increasing NPL 2 and 3. Obviously to try and number one is to try and get more games, of course. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
it's nonsense that we're having 22 games.
22, absolutely.
At this level of football, 22 weeks of a 52-week year doesn't make any sense at all. So, and hopefully that'll continue to grow, and maybe at some point we'll get to 16. But there's going to be a few changes to the structure, and it can only be good for football in Victoria for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely, I think, talk about that in future episodes, but I think that's a great thing, an extra month on top of what we've got already. 22 rounds is just not near enough, so 26 round season is a lot better, and I think that
you look at the dates, Don. So we're going to be finished the season in what?
August, September,
third week in August.
Yeah, I think something like that.
We've got to wait till February before the first round of the Doherty Cup. So it's just too long, and they're things that we will no doubt be talking about for months and years to come until things change.
I don't know about you folks at home, but now that we've well and truly gone past the halfway mark of the season, and you can almost see the end of the season, I'm actually starting to get a bit depressed thinking about what happens when August, September rocks around and there's no community football, no NPL football.
You've got to speak to your wife. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what happens, mate. That's why we're all itching for more games. Yeah, who wants to go shopping? Yeah.
Oh, no, that's right. Oh, goodness me. On to NPL 3. Let's move along there. This is a really interesting battle up the top, obviously, for the top 4 spots, which the top 2, obviously, automatic promotion to NPL 2, but then places 3 and 4 allow that promotion playoff as well. But then at the foot of the ladder, yes, we don't want to be in those red zone because that means you're going to get relegated to State League 1 next season. Let's look at some of the results in starting off with Friday night. We had a really interesting Preston on Doveton. That was a Connor Reserve and Preston Lions after a little bit of a what was it? Take a little bit of a sort of a back on track and doing really.
Yeah, look, Preston Lions, good win for them at home. They struggled for the first half. I think a penalty with Chris Davis on 45 minutes, and Robert Stambulziev getting the second goal for Preston Lions, and keeps them in the hunt in what is a very, very tight tight top of the league there. You'd think the top 4 are going to be in contention, but Nunawading have started to get some results as well, and just 5 points behind West United. But I think those top 4 are going to be vying for those 2 automatic promotion spots. So Preston Lions 2, Doveton 0.
Yeah. And whizzing through the rest of the results, Western United defeated Box Hill 2-1 on Friday night at City Vista Pavilion. Ballarat City went down to Melbourne City 0-5 at the Ballarat Regional Soccer Facility. The televised game between Melbourne Victory and Springvale White Eagles. The White Eagles held Victory very, very well for a long period of time there at Epping Stadium, but then Victory came back to win 2-1 in the end. North Sunshine Eagles and Whittlesea Rangers. Now that's an interesting one. 2-2. North Sunshine, well, they that's definitely 2 points lost there. But Whittlesea Rangers, they look doomed. They are certainly heading for State League football next season. And on Saturday night at Stead Park, very disappointed coach Jake Butler Rude several chances and missed chances, and they ended up going down to Nunawading City 1-0. And speaking of Geelong Soccer Club, their leading marksman, their leading scorer, Vedran Stojanovic, midweek departed Stead Park, and he's gone to play in State League One football with Corio Soccer Club. So that's a big blow for Geelong Soccer Club, who at one stage were harbouring hopes of maybe making that fourth spot. But now they've certainly they've slipped away from Western United, who are in fourth spot. So they're 9 points adrift. They're only 7 points clear of the relegation zone. So better be careful there, the Red and Blacks from Geelong. But it is a very, very congested. Not only is it congested up the top, but it's very congested down the bottom as well. Craig, look at the fixtures. Round 16.
Preston Lions
to Nunawading City on Friday night.
Yeah, that'll be another big fixture. Preston Lions, as we know, have played a lot of their games away in the first half of the season, so we'll have a lot of games up there at BT Connor Reserve over the next couple of weeks, starting on Friday night with Nunawading.
Springvale White Eagles at home to Western United. Springvale White Eagles are starting to pose a few problems for some of the clubs up the top there. Western United are hanging in that fourth position at the moment, 5 points clear of Nunawading City, but that's not where they want to be. They want to be in second spot, or they want to be in first spot. Now, even though Melbourne City are starting to slip away, both Victory and Western United, they don't want to get into any playoff situation. They want an automatic promotion. So from here on in, it's just a case of you got to win all your games. Whittlesea Rangers at home to Geelong Soccer Club on Saturday at Epping Stadium. Melbourne City at home to North Sunshine Eagles also on Saturday. That's at Parade College. Doveton at home to Melbourne Victory. And then Box Hill United host Ballarat City. But let's turn our attention now to State League One, Craig. This is one of those toughest leagues to get out of. And we saw on the weekend your club, Caroline Springs, unfortunately for George Cross fans, went down to Sydenham Park. What happened there?
Yeah, they did actually, 2-1, which was a massively disappointing result for the club, for Eric and his coaching team, in front of a huge crowd up at City Vista yesterday. It was great to see them out, and a big win for Sydenham Park, 2-1, coming out victors there, and closes the gap slightly on Caroline Springs. They're still in the box seat, Tonch, but now it's two losses out of three. Obviously, losing against Essendon Rolls and Sydenham Park. They need to get back to winning ways this weekend when they travel to Altona to take on Altona City. So it's very, very congested there at the top of the of State League One standing, and of course top two go through into MPL 3, and that's what everybody's vying for.
Yeah, look, the good news for Caroline Springs is that they do have a game in hand against Strathmore. But FC Strathmore, geez, they had a good game against Essendon Royals on the weekend, a 1-1 draw against the second-placed Essendon Royals, and as a result, Essendon Royals get they drop to third spot. Not a result the Essendon Royals wanted. But look, ever since Mickey Chelina has taken the helm at Strathnava Reserve, Strathmore, they've actually jumped off the foot of the ladder. They just need to get a couple of good results, and they could find themselves out of the relegation zone after looking certainties to be, wooden spooners, and hence get relegated back to State 2. But a good result there for Strathmore. Some of the other results, Corio Soccer Club, they lost 1-2 to Keilor Park. Now, as we mentioned, Vedran Stojanovic has gone from Geelong Soccer Club in NPL 3. He's returned to Corio. He's like the yo-yo. He goes between Corio and Geelong on so many occasions. He scored for Corio, but it wasn't enough, and Keilor Park able to sort of slip away from that dreaded relegation zone with a very, very important win there at Hume Reserve. Yarraville 3-1 winners over Clifton Hill at McIver Reserve. And here's another interesting result. Banyule City, Craig, they were held to a 1-1 draw by Altona City. That was at Yalambee Park Reserve. Really interesting result, that one.
Yeah, look, Altona City are not an easy team to play against. Very physical, very direct. Banyul City playing up there at Yalambi Park Reserve, which isn't the biggest of pitches anyway, and a 1-1 draw. Banyul, a lot of people's favourites for title contention. They're still in there. Just 5 points behind George Cross, but obviously played a game more. But it's interesting. This league is one of the toughest leagues I've seen in football for many a year. There's anybody can beat anybody, or anybody can pull up a result of some sorts. And you can see there, the difference between, sixth and seventh is 5 points, and the difference from sixth to first is 8 points. So it's a tough league, and speaking on about George Cross, it's everybody's cup final when they play George Cross, because they know that their aspirations are very, very high, and whenever anybody comes up to a game, they lift their game massively. And I suppose it's credit to George Cross, because that's where they are, and that's the sort of the message that they give, or not the message they give, but that's the perception that they are.
Yep.
And they've done very well this year. They've had a bit of a torrid couple of weeks, but as I said, they're still there. Win your games, as it's you win each game as it comes, and take it each week as it comes. I know it's an old adage, but win each game, take 1 week at a time, and then move on. But yeah, it's a tough league, Tonch.
A thrilling culmination coming up there. We'll put the ladder up as we explain or talk about the games coming up in round 16 next weekend. We got some pearlers, absolute pearlers. Look, Keilor Park at home to Clifton Hill, Strathmore at home to Yarraville. Now, this is a big game for Strathmore at home to Yarraville. If ever there was a game that they could win, this is it, and they need this result. Whittlesea United at home to Corio, another big game. This is as big as they come. Both these teams need a win. Whittlesea United and Corio, this is what they call a true 6-pointer. Then we've got Banyul City at home to Brimbank Stallions. Look, 4th versus 5th, can it get any bigger than that? And then Sydenham Park host Essendon Royals, the battle for second spot. Wow, it just gets so exciting, these games. This is going to be, I think, one of the rounds of the season, round 16. And then the big one at Kim Reserve Saturday night, the Maltese Derby, Altona City taking on Caroline Springs. Always a big game between those two. A must-win game for Caroline Springs, Altona City as well. Geez, can't wait for next weekend. And we're not just looking.
The fixtures over the next few weeks, Tonch, as we talk about it each week, are just becoming bigger and bigger. Everybody's playing each other over the top 6 are playing each other over the next 5 weeks. So you certainly within the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll have a definitive, I suppose, answer on where the league's going to go. And possibly who's going to get promoted. But it's a tough league. I keep saying it, but it's one of the toughest leagues I've ever seen.
Absolutely. Jordan Borg, big shout out to Jordan Borg. Thank you for tuning in, replying to say, would be good hearing about all the leagues in one show, not just Geelong teams to remember, but it is what it is. Cheers, mate. And he makes a comment. Here we go. Does the lower state leagues get announced, or just state 1 and higher? Really, just state 1 and higher. If your team's in state 2, 3 or 4, get promoted. We can't cover everyone, unfortunately. However, your club can be featured by all means, and we're more than happy if your club is anywhere and they're willing to sponsor one of the episodes, and we will more than happily promote your club in the Club in Focus. But
absolutely, if we can get some sponsors on board and
absolutely,
and not just our Caroline Springs and George's on Vista, we may be able to do another show in a week, concentrating on all the other leagues. So
we had great support.
It is about time, and we just haven't got enough of it.
No, we don't. And we've had some great support from some clubs over the first 3 seasons. Unfortunately, this year has been a bit of a tough year. It's tough for everyone involved, post-COVID. But indeed, we're certainly not immune to that. Without further ado, we're going to take a very, very short break. When we return, it's time for the press box, and we start talking about the issues of the day. And today, we're going to be talking about the biggest of them all, the state of football in Australia, what needs to be done. And it's all based on an article that was written by the Fairfax Fairfax's or the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald's Michael Lynch, titled "From Kings of Oceania to Asian Minnows Behind the Socceroos Decline." We're going to delve into the true, real state of football in Australia with two of our biggest guests, former Football Australia Technical Director Rob Sherman and the co-CEO of the Professional Footballers Association, BEAU Busch, who will be joining us straight after this break. Folks, don't go away. Extra time has finished, but after the halftime break, we'll be back with the press box. Don't go away.
You find authentic Maltese cuisine? At Georgie's on Vista, in the heart of Fraser Rise. We have a menu to suit everyone, which includes kids and seniors meals, and a cocktail list that will need you to come back several times to get through. Our specialty nights are a big hit. Tuesday is $20 Palmer night with a selection of Palmers to choose from. Kids eat free Wednesday night. With every paid adult meal, you get one free kids meal. Thursday is Maltese night. Check out the Maltese specials on our specials board. And Friday night we have happy hour between 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Be sure to book your table to avoid disappointment. Bookings can be made via our website, georgiesonvista.com.au. See you at Georgie's on Vista. You'll find us at Caroline Springs, George Cross.
Good evening and welcome to the second part of the Football Out West shows tonight. We've got a jam-packed show. We had a huge show in the extra time. We didn't even get a chance to cover the NPLW and the VPLW. And what makes it hard, I guess, on a Sunday night is we're still not getting all the results. With the women's games being played on the Sunday, the clubs need to pull their finger out and get their, and the referees and whoever else is involved, Football Victoria, they need to get the results up, because it makes it very, very difficult to talk about ladders, competition standings when you've only got half the competition's results. So
I think the biggest problem there, Tonch, is the lack of referees, because it's the referees that put in the scores through. And they look,
home clubs can as well. Yeah, they can still jump on and they can do it. And I know with my own little Tackers Junior results, clubs can just jump on and they can put the results, if nothing else. Not the scorers, if we don't have, we're not privy to that, but at least the scores. At least once we've got the scores, the ladders can be updated, and it just works like that. But nonetheless, we'll move on tonight, and we're going to talk about things that are a little bit more important in the state of affairs here with football in Australia. Craig, let's introduce our two guests for tonight. But before we do that, a big shout out to our major sponsor, Caroline Springs George Cross Football Club, home of the award-winning Georgies on Vista. You saw the little ad there at the start of the program for some of the best, one of the best eateries in Caroline Springs, for a perfect place to book your next function, and also come along to watch football in one of the best facilities in the western suburbs there at Caroline Springs George Cross. But Craig, without further ado, let's introduce our guests, tonight's guests.
Yeah, no problem, Tom. So coming up first, we've got a former technical director of the Football Association, or Football Australia rather, guest with us last week, but we just didn't have enough time to finish what we started. So we've invited him back on, and thankfully he stayed awake long enough to come on. It's Rob Sherman. Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, guys. Nice to see you again.
Very well. You sorted your internet out?
Yeah. You're over in New Zealand, so we're expecting a little bit of a delay in watching. But
It's
all
about 3
jokes
years,
aside,
isn't it?
yeah, it
uh,
sometimes looks like Rob's lip syncing, but that's just the lag, I guess. But Rob, no, all jokes aside, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, we haven't got Michael Lynch rejoining us today. He hasn't been able to join us, but Craig, we've got someone who's coming off the substitutes bench at late notice, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome this person. Would you like to do the honours?
It is. He didn't even have time to do his stretches. Tanchi had to come straight in, take his kit off and straight on the pitch. It's the co-CEO of the Professional Association of Australia Footballers. It's BEAU Busch. Good evening, BEAU. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Let's get that right. Professional Footballers Association, PFA co-CEO.
PFA, yeah.
Well, thanks both for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's gents, we'll get started. First of all, Rob, we'll talk to you now. The basis of this discussion was an article that Michael Lynch wrote early in the month, as we can see right there, June the 7th, from Kings of Oceania to Asian Minnows, behind the Socceroos Decline. Now, we talked a little bit about this last week, and look, the Socceroos qualifying for the World Cup maybe has camouflaged some of the issues, some of the real issues that have besotted Australian football. Tell us, in your opinion, the state of football in Australia.
Well, I think there's some good things that happen, without any shadow of a doubt. So we've got to be very careful we don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater. And also, Australia is a very unique country in the sense of geographically and culturally. But I do think we need a strategy that aligns the game and points everyone in one direction. Now, that's easier said than done, I appreciate. But, I don't think it's something that can't be done. And I do think the game probably operates at about 50% of its potential. I think you've got unlimited potential here. And with the right approach, you could future-proof the game. And when I say that, I think we've got to be very careful that with the changes in society that we've seen over the last 25 years or so, we need to actually embrace and engage young people to play football and stay in football or sport. Otherwise, the raw materials will be getting fewer and fewer. So it's not just about the best, it's about everything at every level. So all players, all clubs, all coaches, the strategy needs to embrace all of them.
BEAU, we'll get your take on it as obviously as an ex-professional football player yourself, and have been through obviously the processes. Where do you see the state of the game currently in Australia?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And obviously, Rob, I think from a technical point of view, is far ahead of what I can add to that particular debate. I think, thankfully, I have been through that system. Thankfully, for the state of Australian football, this current generation are far better than what I was as a player. So that should be a big relief to everybody that unfortunately had to witness me playing. But I think where we sort of look at where we go to now, we face a raft of challenges, but there's also importantly a huge amount of opportunity for what we look at going further. So as we look forward at the moment, we've got a World Cup on the men's and women's side to look forward to in the next 12 months. And I don't think we've had opportunities of this scale previously in any other 12-month period. But to the point you raised in the first question to Rob around camouflaging or not, my view is that our approach to assessing where we're at shouldn't change whether or not we qualify for World Cups or not. We should be able to assess independently of where we're at, independently of the results, and look at how we can improve. So I think that process would have needed to occur whether we qualified or not. And certainly our hope is that we continue to look at any way we can improve as a football nation. I think one of the big shifts we've got to go through in this game, and to Rob's point of how do we unify the game, I think we consistently focus on what we don't have rather than what we do have. Right now we have discussions around don't have 58 professional clubs. Well, we have 13 if we take into account the A-League women's and A-League men's. And what we need to do is get 13 clubs right. Then we need to get 14 clubs right. We need to provide the best youth opportunities for players in those particular clubs. We need to make sure they're well coached. And we need to make sure that youngsters can access the sport. The cost isn't a barrier. And then also the cost doesn't become a barrier coming into the professional game. And I think once we're in the game, which we're seeing more now, we're seeing this promising generation of young talent come through. We need to focus really heavily on how do we take them from being a promising young player, like we've seen recently in the AFC, to being able to become a world-class Socceroo. And that's the challenge that the game's confronted with now. COVID's seen a big shift. There's now more opportunity. We need to see how do we turn that opportunity into becoming world-class players to make us into a world-class football nation.
Rob, firstly to you, you were the technical director at Football Australia, and obviously that's a key area that you specialise in. Coaches, particularly coaches, not so much at the elite level, at the upper level, but when kids are starting, say at the NPL level, a community level, is enough being done to promote capable coaches, good coaches, potential coaches, or is, for example, the $1,200, $1,300 that is charged for a C license course? Is that a hindrance to a lot of good potential coaches in many ways, that it's also a hindrance, the cost factor for a lot of players? Let's talk about the coaching side of it.
Okay, so the cost factor is not unique to Australia. It's quite a global thing that I would say federations don't invest enough back into the game in that area. So that's not the criticism solely to FFA or FA, beg your pardon. Ultimately, you need to make it more accessible from a price wise, without any shadow of a doubt. I think when I initially did the role of head of coach ed, I set it at 120 a day on the basis that was the market value, say, for a gym teacher's course or a fitness trainer's course or something of that nature. And that would apply to all courses, bar the pro license. But the other thing is, I think, in terms of the lower level, you've got a real challenge. So in generations past, you would have had street football, or the like, people playing a lot of informal football. Those days have gone. And in many respects, well, you need to train those who have access to our fledgling players, just the ones who just want to play, where they don't spoil the players. They actually put on activities that move quickly. There's no lines, no queues, and it's fun. And if we just keep them coming, and that's the success of that level, is actually the retention marker is success. If you keep them in the game, you've been successful. And then for those who want more, we need to make sure that they have the appropriate pathway around, accessing more. And that's, I'll talk a little bit about maybe building the workforce and providing those opportunities, because I think that's essential. So for those who just want to play, we just don't want to spoil them. Just give them a good time.
Yeah, there's a comment there as every club and training kids like robots. And at the end product is robots, no flair and X factor from any junior team. Is that a problem, Rob, also, and Bo, you can jump in at any time with this, that the curriculum is there, and it's not there as a Bible, it's there as a guide. Do we tend to use the curriculum perhaps too aggressively, and we're not allowing our players to show their flair? Instead, we probably entail that a little bit and take it off them to say, well, no, I want you to do this. If you look at, the likes of your Ryan Giggs of an early generation, Rob, from Wales, I'm sure the coaches of that level will just say, when you get the ball, just do what you do. Are we frightened to do that, or am I way off track?
Sorry, Bo, are you okay if I jump on that one?
Yeah, of course, go for it, Rob.
I think the curriculum, one of the biggest faults of the curriculum, which was something that needed addressing, was we should never put the 1-4-3-3 in. A formation isn't the playing style. And actually, that becomes a limiting factor. if you read some of the detail in there, it does talk about flexibility and the like. But I do think the problem is that we're coaching formations far too early, and instead of just letting players adapt. So again, the guidance was, generally one player far, one middle, one left, one right, and that would apply no matter where you were on the pitch, and which gives that sort of total football approach. The other thing with flair is, I'm not sure anyone ever coached flair. I think flair developed in the informal environment.
Mm-hmm.
You learned that when you're going up against the big guy who was quicker, you learned the trick after failing innumerable times. And I think the biggest challenge we have with coaches is we don't let our players fail. We castigate them far too much. Parents do, coaches do. You only learn by failing, and you find your own way, and that is flair. And that's probably what is missing at that level, is we're too concerned with almost instant improvement, but it takes years, and it takes a lot of mud on you. It takes a lot of custard on your face, as a player. And I think we should be encouraging failure and people having a go and taking risk much more than playing safe.
I'd agree with those points, Rob. I don't know if we ever had the chance to discuss it, but I think we'd certainly flag to have a discussion around. We did a really comprehensive study around the golden generation to try and understand the key ingredients that went into their development. And what we sort of looked at, and the title of the report became Culture Amplifies Talent. And it really identified how key culture was. And it identified a few different aspects of that. But what was crucial was that the club, the players' junior club, became the sort of beating heart of that community, and the players spent all of their time down there, that they had a mentality that allowed them to go and cope with the inevitable ups and downs of a professional sporting career. They also had a real passion for the game. It wasn't a passion that was confined to just their individual, it was also to their entire family as well too. So that gave them the drive to get out there and practice and train. And also importantly as well too, they often played up. They had older siblings or others. So there were these key areas that what we sort of thought about when we were doing the report was it was actually beyond the curriculum, and sort of looking at how do we embed these cultural aspects that we know are really important to help produce world-class players. Australia's done it before. What can we learn from that? The point that Rob made earlier, society is very different, so we can't go back and put players into that same context. We need to accept we're in a different context now. But I think foundationally, we found with the golden generation, this country could produce world-class players. We just needed to deeply understand the context and make sure then we put in place a system that allows them to flourish.
Some good questions, some good points being raised. Craig, we've got some really good questions as well from some of the viewers. Let's have a look at some of them. There's so many questions. Keep them coming, folks, by the way. Craig, switch your phone on.
Yeah, sorry. We'll touch on one.
On.
We'll touch on one there. There's one from Tony Huddo Hudson. AIS was good, but it was a finished school. Majority of players were already on their way before they get there. There's been a lot of talk, and I'm sure both of you will have your say on this, about the fact that the AIS no longer exists and it's never going to exist again. I think we all realise that that's not going to happen. What's the next step forward for those talented youngsters that were the golden generation, as you spoke about? What's the next AIS? What does it look like from a player's perspective? Either of you can jump in there.
But I certainly believe that academies are the way to go. I do think they need to be quantified, so that actually, as I said last week, in my opinion, it's probably the most abused word in Australian football, because everyone's got an academy. I think they need to be quantified. There needs to be a criteria that clubs have to meet. It could be open, so not based on the competition structure. So you're not imposing something necessarily to be at a certain level. There should be a minimum bar with that. What you're putting is something where there's a high bar categorization. So you could have a totally amateur club playing at the 5th level who have a fantastic youth program and meet the standard. If they're willing to do it and invest in that, that's fine. And then and then you've got an environment where you've created, maybe currently there's maybe 13, 14, could have 40 AISs covering players from 13 or 12 to 20. And ultimately, in my belief, the bigger player development program, the bigger the talent pool, the more likelihood is you produce the one or two that go on to play top football in every year. And you only need one or two a year to have a national team with a squad of 20. And there'll be a 10-year age span between the eldest and the youngest. And there's your top team. But it takes 20 years, by the way.
Oh, yes. Tell me about it. Yes. Oh.
Yeah, I'd agree with the points Rob's made. I think the timing of the closure of the AS was always going to be pretty problematic for the game. Were the A-League clubs in a position to assume that responsibility? And I think they probably weren't. They would admit that themselves. I think since then, but they've grown dramatically. When you go out and see Melbourne City now, when you see Melbourne Victory, you see Western Sydney, to what they're investing into their academies, the way these players are developing, and we're seeing more and more of them progress into the A-League and become important national team players for us as well too. So we're seeing that work, and I think there was an inevitability that we were going to transition out of the AIS into an academy model that we see pretty much around the world. And I think importantly, we're seeing some progress. I think when we look on the women's side, we need to have a proper discussion around, is there a role for something similar to the AIS at the moment? I think back in 2015, we saw the Matildas basically become a full-time program because the club environment didn't facilitate that to allow them to prepare adequately for the Women's World Cup. As we approach 2023, we've still got those same challenges as a game, that a number of players are having to jump between the A-League women's and overseas competitions to a number of players that played this morning for us as well too, that are now playing in the NPLW. So can we replicate something similar? And is something similar important in the women's game? I think it's important that we don't confine the discussion to player development just in the men's game, but also look at where we can actually look at some of the things that have worked previously and how we can apply them to the women's game as well too, which is a vastly different context, particularly in the club environment as well too.
Bo, that's a really good point you bring about. And Optus Sport recently had a three-part or four-part discussion there about the state of the game, and there's the PFA's thoughts on what I guess we need to do. But let's get back to the women's one, which was part 4 of that little by Jake Rosengarten. Bundoora, home of the Matildas. That's going to also be the future home of Football Victoria as well. And obviously the World Cup, the Women's World Cup next year. Will that change? What you're talking about, will that facility provide that type of program, and especially with the Women's World Cup, that impetus that it needs? Because we saw overnight the Matildas got hammered by Spain, and it was kind of an experimental team. It was kind of like it wasn't a full-strength Matildas, but it says that there is a big gulf between those best players, the Sam Kerrs and what you're not, and then the next grade. So to bridge that gap, an AIS style program at Bundoora, is that something that's pie in the sky thinking, or is that something maybe even in the pipeline?
No, I don't think so. I think importantly as well too, it'll be one of a number of things we need to do. We need to grow the A-League women's competition to ensure that it's a 12-month offering for players. I think we need to make sure that players then, that we have the best possible employment conditions here that allows players to develop on and off the pitch as well too. That's going to be fundamental for the future going forward. If we can expand the A-League women's competition as well too, we'll see more players playing more match minutes. If you look at the match minutes available currently for A-League women's players, they're far inferior to what we're seeing over in the UK, to Spain, etc. So we need to grow that out. I think that's really clear, and I'm really confident the discussions we're having with APL at the moment will be able to significantly increase that next year and again the year after. So that will play a part. But getting back to your point around having a centre of excellence or something like that, that could be part to supplement that as well too. And then how do we go from having primarily A-League women's teams to have an A-League women's youth team? And building that out more and more. They're the challenges that we've got to confront, because I think we've got this wonderful opportunity with this golden generation of talent. But I think what we want to do is turn into a world-class football nation on the women's side, not just for one generation, but for the next 20, 30 years into the future as well too. And that's the opportunity we've got with the Women's World Cup, that we can really set in place a virtuous cycle rather than just currently enjoying this current generation of players, that we actually plan for the future at the same time as well.
Brilliant. Rob, your thoughts about that? Let's talk about the women's side of things, the women's side of the equation.
I think we should mention that, Leah Blaney's running the program, Future Matildas program. So there is something that is currently operating, whether that's at the zenith or not. Let's not park that at the minute. But I think the evolution of the game, that's part of the strategy. So currently, the women's numbers, for instance, are considerably lower than the men's. Hopefully, as numbers grow, you can transition from your state-run programs and have academy programs running within each of the A-League clubs, for instance. Obviously, having a fuller season is a major factor. So it's working out, if you like, the steps towards, and it takes time. You've got to be careful that you don't miss the short-term goal, which is putting the women in the best environment possible for as long as possible, identifying talent early and giving them the best opportunity to develop. And that could mean actually placing our most talented women in the boys' programs. If you look at historically, some of the best female players in the world have played with boys. And so we shouldn't exclude anything. It's totally up for grabs here. But we need to desperately make sure that we don't end up in competition, if you like, between, say, state programs and the aspirations of the A-League club to run academies, that we work on complementary programs. And this is what I was talking about earlier about we've got to get all the guns pointing in the same direction. Everyone needs to realize their role, and there might be a transition and exchange of power, or actually the state programs might look into regional areas while the clubs take care of city areas. And so no matter where I live in Australia, we've got a bit of potential of talent and catered for.
Now, one of those, obviously, you've talked about, other areas of the country. We currently have 7 states, by my reckoning. Each state has their own agendas and do their own things. Is that something that really needs to be brought into line where, each of the 7 states, there is a clear plan of what's needed and everybody's on the sort of same page rather than what it is at the moment, because you've got Queensland doing whatever they do, New South Wales, Western Australia, Victoria. What's your thoughts on that? Should it all be aligned?
Personally, yes. That doesn't mean they have to do exactly the same thing. Obviously, there's challenges in certain states that are different from each. But I would say in terms of quality, you need one academy criteria. You can't have a different one. When we set up the NPL back in 2010, whatever it was, each state ended up with a different version of what NPL is in terms of the criteria. If you'd have followed that, the guidelines at the time, which were set by the technical department, you probably would have your second tier already. So the thing being, if you're going to call something a national program, like a national academy program, it has to be uniform. You can't have a diversification.
And why
equally
did that?
So you need to think outside the box.
Why weren't those procedures put in place, Rob? You were obviously involved at the time when the NPL became part of what we see now. But you're right, it's called the National Premier League. Now, there's a lot of criteria that went into that, but then all of a sudden we've seen a lot of other clubs jumping on the NPL ladder. Was that around numbers? Was it about financial side for those extra teams, or what was the goal with that? Because all of a sudden you've seen a big jump from, let's just say it was 12 teams. I think it was 12 actually originally, certainly in Victoria, to enter 16. What's your reckoning on that?
Well, I think the first one would be, again, process and timeline. So, instead of maybe putting the criteria out and saying to clubs, there's a 2-year window and the NPL will start, but you need to get to this level. It was almost done as next year is going to be NPL. And it became a shock to the clubs, and there was pushback. Well, we can't do this in this time, which is totally understandable, given and just the actual rolling out of the whole program probably meant that. And then I think, obviously, you do want promotion, relegation, etc. And again, just working through the whole process possibly was accelerated. And so you've got maybe clubs in NPL 3 who actually don't meet the criteria for NPL 2. So if you win the league, in theory, you shouldn't go up, etc., etc. So I don't know what the motivations were, but in many respects, it's rebranded State League.
Bo?
Yeah, I think, guys, we don't work extensively at that level, so I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
express an extremely strong view on that, guys. But I think, around the world, Rob made that point earlier around the challenges with coach education and cost, that's not a problem confined to Australia. I think the aspect of unity anywhere around the world in football can be challenging when you've got clubs, leagues, zones, federations, counties, what have you. It becomes challenging to always get people on the same page. But I think Rob's right. We know that that's incredibly powerful if we can do that. But as a game, we don't only need to line up behind a plan, we need to execute, and we need to be really diligent with that. One of the challenges we had for a period of time, the whole of football plan that we know a lot of money was spent on, and there was a huge amount of consultation done around that. And then recently we've transitioned into, before the whole of football plan expired, into the 11 principles. So I think that's sort of constant changing as well too. We need to be able to do the work to come up with a plan, particularly around play development, that we can all buy into. And we need to be absolutely committed to that. And that could be challenge around that sometimes. We maybe won't qualify for a men's World Cup or a women's World Cup, but if we truly believe in the plan, then it becomes about consistent improvement, alignment to that, and then just being really disciplined and executing it and having the courage of our convictions. I think when we look at our most successful coaches, like an Ange, if he's down 4-0 at half time, he continues to play the way he knows, it's ultimately going to be successful. And we know that with our most successful players, clubs, leagues around the world. They're very clear on what they stand for. They've done the work to be able to have a view on where they want to go. And then they're absolutely committed to bringing that to life. And I think that's a real challenge for Australian football. When it gets tough, do we have the courage of convictions to be able to stay disciplined and execute what we agree is really important?
It's a great point, isn't it, Rob? Because going back to our time back in God's country, where we had to do that effectively, and it upset a lot of people. That I remember being told that now under eights are going to be playing 4v4, and everybody was up in arms saying 4v4, don't be stupid. I've always played 11v11. I've got the little guy in goals and the big guy up front. But it took a lot of conviction from Football Association of Wales at the time, which you were part of then, Rob, to sort of say, no, this is how we're going to do it. And the results were, as we've spoken about previously, 20 years later, Rob, is you're getting the benefits of that. And I think you're absolutely spot on, Bo. I think it is that power of conviction to have that plan. And regardless of what happens, that's the plan and that's what we're going to stick to, because it's tried and tested elsewhere.
I think the interesting thing you both touched on there is the continuity. So, Jimmy was the initiator. Jimmy Shoulder was the initiator of the plan. Mike Rigg took over from Jimmy. Mark Elizabeth took over from Mike. I took over from Mark. Oshan took over from me. And now Dave Adams taken over from Oshan. And basically, every one of us has just continued the plan. That's not to say they're not modifications and slight adaptations, but there was no need for people to try and wipe that completely off the table. It was just a case of actually evolving that to match the time and the need. And so I think that's a key one. I think one of the challenges is always someone who comes into the business feels that they need to make change, and it becomes radical change instead of evolutionary change.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, Rob, around when people come in. I know that myself, when Kate and I were appointed at the PFA, you feel that there's a sense that you need to be this sort of out in front leader and put your own stamp on things, where reality is often the work that was done before you is pretty sound, and that somebody had been in the role for a significant amount of time. So it becomes this sort of consistent part. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement and sort of almost incremental gains. When we look at the most successful sporting organisations to businesses, they're often focused every day on just getting a little bit better. And at the end of a period of time, whether that's a year, 2 years, they're in a far better position. So that can become really difficult, because sometimes you'll have to sit in a chair and take a lot of heat whilst you go through that process of improvement. But ultimately, if you know where you're going and you're able to see that improvement day on day, then you can ride that out, and you ultimately end up in a far better point. And the alternative really isn't a viable one, which is consistently changing the plan when things get tough. And Rob, I'm sure, knows this far better than I. In a team sport, if you're constantly saying to players, today we're going to play this way, this didn't work, we're now going to try something else, we're then going to shift to 5-4-1, now we're just going to try and play out from the back, we're going to launch it down the pitch, that's not a plan. That's just being reactive, and I don't think anyone gets anywhere doing that.
Yeah, Bo, in the article by Michael Lynch from Kings of Oceania to Asian Minnows, He talks to Nick Galatas, who's Craig's just left the building. He's like Elvis. He talks to Nick Galatas, the chairman of the AAFC, and he talks about his body pushing for a national second division. Now, in it, and I'll quote this: his group argues that would create not just on-field jeopardy, which would toughen players up mentally and physically, but also provide several hundred extra professional opportunities for younger players, many of whom are discarded prematurely because they don't make restricted size A-League squads. If there's, obviously there's a whole host of factors that are required to make Australia a football nation as much as it is a sporting nation, as you said in the Optus Sport article. Is that one major component from your point of view and the body that you represent, the players, providing more opportunities to expand the footprint of professional footballers here in Australia? Is the national second division, in your eyes, a key component of that?
I think it can be, guys. I think if we can get more opportunity for players, coaches, administrators, referees, all those sort of things are going to be really important. The level that opportunity is at is going to be fundamental as well too, because we know that we can't play the numbers game that some other nations can play, whether that's in England, whether that's a Brazil, where we can have, thousands of professional players. So we need to not only just focus on trying to match them for numbers, we need to match them for quality. That needs to be the real focus. But I think importantly for us, if we can do a national second division, if we can have strong clubs in that league, have a strong league, have a really good focus on player development and give more opportunity to Australian players, then we'd be really supportive of that. I think what's fundamental as we go through this process, and it was identified in the white paper, that this league isn't developed in the absence of all stakeholders. Actually, players are deeply involved in it, coaches are adding their expertise, the clubs that are going to have to employ these players. And then we're really focused on what is this league actually about and being really crystal clear on that, and then executing everything that sits around that in line with its overall objective. That's going to be fundamental. But to answer your question, guys, I think it could be a really important step forward. There's obviously a huge amount of work that needs to go into it, but we're encouraged that work's happening.
And there's a good comment just come up there from Simon Cowley about who's looking at the football talent, and it was one question that I really wanted to ask you, Rob, and national talent ID and the processes around that. Do we have a national talent ID program? I know there's the TIDC locally here in Victoria, but as I said last week on the show, and back in my day, back in the UK, you'd go out on a Sunday morning and you'd see 10, 15, 20 scouts from various professional clubs within the region out on the pitches every week, looking at these talented young children. Now, I know it's very different to the UK because there's not 97, 98 professional clubs. But is the talent ID process working? And is it your belief either way that it is or it's not? And if it's not, what needs to change?
I think it's a massive challenge. Often the overused word is, everyone can pick the best players. I'm not sure that's true. I think that everyone can look at the players who are performing currently, and often in age group football, that's based on physicality and maturity. And therefore, I think we need to set a framework where people look at players differently. So you're looking at potential as well. Then you need to monitor that. So, and again, because of the age groups at international level, 17, 20s, we work in cycles. Now, we need to have age groups at 15, 16 all the way through. So you don't work in cycles, you work continually. And you can monitor players who might not play in the 17s, but might be a top international later on when they mature. And so, in many regards, we disregard players far too easy. And that's not only, I think, in international sphere. I'm sure clubs do exactly the same. So they're looking at performance now instead of potential and improvement. So I think there is a massive issue around player ID that infiltrates at all levels in the game. In community football, how many kids don't get a game or stand on the sideline for the majority of their experience? No wonder they evacuate. No wonder they pull the plug at a certain age and leave, because that's not what it's about. You want a game of football. There was a little comment came up by Mark just then in terms of. I just want to raise this one, Mark. around the largest numbers in the community, should we put the investment there? One of the things I firmly believe around the first and potential second division is you can grow the workforce. If we quantify what those clubs have to look like, so there is criteria now with the A-League, always has been, and the criteria you put on the second tier. If it includes youth development and say community development, all of a sudden we could quadruple, or even more than that, the workforce. They could then work and form relationships and connections with their community clubs, which builds trust, which I think is lacking. And that connection then means the workforce, they can help improve the game at all standards. So actually from a top-down approach, you could be supporting the whole game and not working in isolation. And I think that would create a more genuine authenticity with those clubs, with their communities.
Yeah, look, I think that A-League, NPL, community clubs, schools, the links are massively important. I think there is a disconnection between local community clubs and the professional clubs for a number of reasons. I just don't think the criteria has been set out for how it happens, what it happens if a A-League club highlights a potential player. There should be a criteria which should be set in stone, and I don't believe it is. And I sort of speak from experience on that. But you know, I wrote something down earlier on in the piece about the World Cup. We had we'll get 50 million from getting to the World Cup. Bo, am I fair? Is it a fair and reasonable request to say that some of that money or a big proportion of that money should be put into that grassroots level, or an area that Rob just said then around finding those right people to do specific jobs?
I hope so, Craig. You know, there's an amount that we've negotiated that goes to the players that reflects the importance of qualifying for the World Cup, and that's the same for the men's and women's side. But I think ultimately what we need to do is sort of step back. We want an economic model that aligns everybody's interests around that. So if we know that qualifying for a World Cup should be hugely important to the entire game, then the entire game should benefit from that. If we know the Asian Champions League matters, well, how do we align everybody's economic interests around that? If we know that selling a player from the A-League to overseas to a big league is important for our game to be internationally competitive, to achieve those other aims, then we need to build a model that works around that. And that's sort of our focus at the moment, moving away from the sort of traditional transaction sort of basis that comes around the transfer system, and how do you actually align everybody's interests so that we're seeing Melbourne City really keen to release a player to go into the national team because they're going to benefit from that. We're seeing a player's journey from all the way from the grassroots into the A-League still have a connection that ensures that their junior club's benefiting consistently throughout that. So I think that's important, of how do we make sure that the entire game is aligned around these key things that really matter? How do we then build an economic model that actually rewards that as well too, and incentivizes everybody to pull in the right direction? Because ultimately self-interest is going to matter, but we want everybody's self-interest to be aligned to the broader interests of the game as well too.
Yeah, it is a shame we can't go on for another hour. This is riveting discussion, and we've had so much good, constructive input from our viewers as well. So we really appreciate all of our viewers coming on board. Gents, we appreciate you guys coming on board. And this is certainly a discussion that's not going to go away. And definitely we'll be delving into it. And remember, it's an election year as well. We've had the federal election. Now we've got the state elections coming up.
Sherman for Prime Minister. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But on that note, we've got the World Cup, the Women's World Cup. There's talk possibly even Australia bidding for the Asian Cup. Rob, where to now? Very, very quickly, 25 words or less, matter of fact speaking. Which direction do we need to go? What do we need to most focus on? And then I'll ask you the same question, Bo. But over to you, Rob. Where do we need to go from here?
Well, both the national coaches have got what they've got. So it's the future we need to look at. So for me, the biggest thing is alignment and a clear strategy. And that includes, as Bo rightly touched on, the economic benefit to the whole game. And that strategy has got to be a long-term one, not a next 4-year cycle. It's got to be something that we pursue for the next 20 years. And I'd love to get my hands dirty again, if I'm honest.
Look, I think there's a couple of comments came up earlier on in the piece there that says
we need you back.
You should be back on board. And look, if anybody from Football Australia is listening, Rob, Hey, they know how to contact you. I'm sure. I know you left, but I know you're itching to get your hands dirty, as you said again. And it would be a sad state of affairs if we couldn't get somebody that's got your experience and has done this before on board to try and to get the game back where it should be, because we're falling very further and further behind our Asia counterparts, unfortunately, and that's not really where we want to be. But Bo.
Yeah, I think, guys, look, simply for me, we're not in football. My strong belief is you're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to be successful in Asia. We're not entitled to be world champions to qualify for World Cups.
That's a good point.
We have to earn that, and we have to do everything right. And I think there's two parts that are really foundational for us. That is access. We need to make sure the sport's affordable. People can access it. Coaches can access it. Whatever it is, that we make sure that all those sort of important components, there aren't too many barriers in the way of people. And then the second part is support. As I said earlier, how do we take these promising young talent that we're getting into the sport and turn them into world-class players? And that's going to be around the environment, the culture that we have around the sport. We do those things, and I think we'll be in a far better place than we are. But we need to have the discipline to be able to execute that over the long term. This isn't a 2-year plan, a 4-year plan. This needs to be a 20, 25-year plan. And there'll be difficult moments during that, but we need to really focus in on executing that.
Here. I absolutely agree with that. That's fantastic. Bo, Rob, thank you so much, gents, for joining us on this Sunday evening. We really appreciate it. Certainly more than welcome for you, gents, to come back on the show. And as Tony Hudson says, oh, mate, I love you. He says, the best football show in the country. Rob is a legend. Need him involved. I'll agree on both points there, Tony. Yes, best show in the country. Thank you very much. And Rob, we absolutely do want you involved and the same thing applies, Bo. Gents, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, wishing you all the very best, and looking forward to having you guys on the show. Craig, the best football show in the country in the future. Yeah,
look, I think the comments and the views that we can see, show that this is a talking point. It's not. We could get anybody on and talk football, but ultimately it's about getting football better in Australia. And the more conversations and the more debates we have about this, the easier it will be. Because if we're not debating it, then it's not going to go away. So we have to keep, we hammering that table and making a point. But fantastic conversations, and guys, really appreciate your time on a Sunday evening. Thanks, Rob. I know you're a few hours in front of us down there in New Zealand, but really appreciate your time, pal.
Thanks for the opportunity, and good to see you again, Bo. Keep well.
Thanks, guys.
You too. Take care, guys. Have a good evening.
Good job. Good on you. Rob Sherman and Beau Busch. Oh, fantastic conversation. Once again, seriously, folks, all of you that have been involved in the comments section, asking questions, putting forward suggestions, opinions as well. Good on you. Well done. Craig, that brings us to the end of episode 94. Next week, I'm sure, is going to be another. Well, we talked about the NPL 1, 2, and 3, State League 1. Hopefully, we'll also be able to cover the NPLW, VPLW as well. But a lot of interesting football happening on and off the park. Really looking forward to next show. And this show's just finished. So enjoy the week. We look forward to next week, hey?
We certainly will. We'll get something planned for next week, and I'm sure it'll be as big as this one. It has to be. This was a great show tonight. Really enjoyed this. I could have talked. I said to you in the message there, could have talked for another hour, but unfortunately, we can't. But we'll make sure we come back next week.
On that note, thanks, folks, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. For those that do tune in on a Monday night to our sister program, the Geelong Region Soccer Show, be sure to watch out for a special club in focus on North Geelong Warriors, and we'll be focusing a lot on their junior program. Just keeps on churning out great young junior players, and also their women's program, which is an up-and-coming program as well. So we'll be talking to members of the North Geelong Warriors Football Club. We'll also be on Wednesday night. We've got the Oz Crows Soccer Show with Josip Zilic and myself, and we'll be talking to the Sydney United father and son duo of Miro and Adam Vlastelica, who will be talking to us all the way from Sydney. So lots of football happening this weekend. But until next Sunday night, 7 p.m. on the Football Out West Show, make sure you have a fantastic week. Good night.
you.